speaker's gone all now.
Good afternoon. Welcome. It really is fantastically great to be out and about again. It feels like forever since I've been able to go out and actually see people. In the UK, we're a little bit lucky. We don't need to wear the masks anymore, but it feels like we've been locked away, hiding for the last 3 years. So this conference is magnificent. I mean, frankly, the size is staggering. And genuinely, I wanted to say thank you for all you guys coming along today and listening to Steve and I banging on about customer service for the next hour. So today what we want to do is talk a little bit about a partnership that we've built up with BT over the last 10 years. And the solution that we co-developed and deployed that frankly leverages our AI technology and is saving millions of pounds annually. And these are validated benefits from the end customer, as well as increasing first contact resolution and NPS. So this is really about a practical application of AI. So, first thing I want to do is I'll hand over to Steve and I'll let him introduce himself, and then I'll introduce myself and talk a little bit around what my background is and why I feel that I should be on the stage talking to you today. So, Steve.
No, thank you very much. And it is a pleasure to be back in front of everybody. You're perfectly correct. My name is Steve Kennedy. I have been in knowledge management for the last 20 odd years now. And one of the things that we focus on is how we can take knowledge management and how we can turn things around within a customer service world, how you do things better. I actually started my life as a support engineer, and we were using knowledge way back in that time. Yes, I've got gray hair. It's been a long time that I've been doing this, but it's amazing to see how things have progressed. And part of the story that you're going to hear today is all about how you can get the benefits that you need out of there. So like I say, 20 years of knowledge management, lots of customer service experience. So if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to come and ask. Noel.
Thank you. My name's Noel Harris. I am the head of customer success in Europe for eGain. I've worked for eGain now for about 8 years. Started as a digital transformation director, so working with large-scale companies who had bought a whole raft of technology, but actually didn't really know how to operationalize and deploy it and then industrialize the solution. So my background actually, prior to joining eGain and working in the software space, is telco. So I started as an advisor on the phones, good grief, 27 years ago. I worked it out the other day. I feel really old now. But yeah, it was 27 years ago. I started as an advisor on the phone, worked up to a team leader, then worked to ops, and then moved into outsourcing, where I managed a number of our BPOs for, at that point, Single Point, which was then bought by Vodafone. So I historically managed voice centres through our BPO partners in the UK. More latterly, I was then asked to set up a BPO solution out of India in order to manage email and back office, and was also challenged to go and have a look at that web chat thing, see if it's got legs, because it was still relatively early. I mean, this was 15 years ago. So I went out there, set up a web chat solution and grew it to around 200 FTE. At that point, I actually moved over to Telefonica in the UK and was given pretty much the same mandate. What we need to do, or the challenge that I was given, is to effectively reduce the amount of FTE that we need within voice by ensuring that we're delivering a web chat function, growing it as big as we can be, and funding it by FTE reductions in voice and email. And we did that. When I left Telefonica to join eGain, we were running at circa 1,000 concurrent FTE in chat. and that was across multiple sites, both in the UK and in India. So at that point, I went over to Capita and then moved over to eGain post that. So a lot of experience in the sector, a lot of experience of taking those digital products, operationalising them and then industrialising them. And in order to give you a view of the scale, when I left Telefonica, we were saving circa £20 million a year in FTE savings, and we did that through deflection and pushing contacts through a more productive channel with a lower repeat rate than both voice and email. So massive savings, along with circa £5 million annually in incremental revenue through the sales channel. So I think the reality is that the telco market is saturated, right? The reality is that the majority of networks have all the same handsets. They've got broadly all the same tariffs. The broadband offerings are pretty much the same. The reality is that pretty much everyone has got all the products, and there aren't that really many differentiators between the networks. Could be a little bit on pricing, there may be an exclusive handset there, one tariff might have a bundle, but broadly the offerings are the same. The differentiator for telcos today is really around customer experience. That is the one and only differentiator. And for a business within the telco sector, you have to fight to keep your customers, but then also look to bring in disaffected customers from other networks. And the focus is all around those individual moments of truth, those interactions that can be few and far between, that should be the best experience that you can possibly deliver. Gartner said that less than 10% of AI projects actually deliver any sort of investment payback. I think it's fair to say, and we've probably all been guilty of this, when machine learning and AI came out, everyone was like, oh, this is great, it's the best thing, we need to do something, we have to find a use case to leverage machine learning and AI because everyone's talking about it. So we all sit in these rooms, probably with whiteboards, with pens, and we're coming up with these great ideas. But actually, it then quickly turns into a science project. Massive, loads of people involved, and actually never really pays back the investment that has been made. So what we're going to talk about today is the BT telco story. Where they have absolutely deployed our AI capability in a practical way and are saving millions of pounds every year. So, let me pose this question. You leave the conference today, you jump in a cab, you're either going back to the hotel or you're going to the airport or you're going home. And all of a sudden, poof, a genie appears. Please stay with me on this. I am going somewhere. So this genie sits there and says, right, you have one wish. And in terms of what those wishes could be, I can give you either a 30-point increase in NPS, I can give you a 35% improvement in your FCR, or every new advisor that you have, we will halve their competency glide path. And by the way, we'll also reduce their training time by 50%. You can have one of those wishes. So quick show of hands. Who here, if they had one wish, thinks that NPS is the most important thing for their business? Okay, we've got a few. Brilliant. First contact resolution. Who thinks that's the most important thing? Interesting. First contact resolution, it's easy to monetize, right? NPS isn't so easy to monetize. Who thinks reducing the competency glide path and reducing the training time is the most important thing? So actually, there's quite a few there. And to be honest, it's a pretty even spread. The reality is that BT EE delivered all of them, all three of them. And that was with a practical application of our capability. They are saving millions annually. And think about that for a second. Tomorrow, you go back to your operation and you immediately saw a 30-point increase in NPS. A third of your repeat calls disappears, and actually your competency glide path halved and your training time halved. Imagine what that would do for your business. I mean, these are big numbers, you know. These are numbers that BT themselves have 100% allocated to the work that we did collectively, leveraging our AI capability. This is very much part of the 10% of AI projects that pay back, as Gartner said. And it's relatively easy to deploy. I really can't stress that enough. So, in terms of size and scale, today the solution is being consumed by 12,000 contact centre and retail agents. They are managing about 500,000 sessions per week. So this is big in terms of consuming the capability. That is across their customer base at circa 27 million subscribers. And we've built the solution so there are actionable insights. So it's heavily tied into the analytics that allows them to understand by conversation type what the query type was and what the outcome or resolution was. We also, and Steve will go through it, I'm not stealing your thunder, I promise.
I'm saying nothing, no.
But you've got the ability to pause and resume. There is nothing more frustrating for customers than speaking to one of your agents, having to stop for whatever reason because, you know, I've got to pick the kids up from school or I need to go and validate some information, coming back through and then having to start from scratch again. Ugh. Well, we've actually got pause and resume capability, so it doesn't matter. For 30 days, customers can come back at any point and continue from the point that they left off. And these are all the building blocks that are available to you today. So, how could you get there? I think it's fair to say that the world stopped when COVID hit, right? Businesses didn't, but the world did. We all hid away in our living rooms and bedrooms, doing our Zoom calls and team calls and loving life, stuck at home and never seeing anyone. But what COVID did do is it changed our thinking. It made us rethink what our priorities were. So for us as business leaders, what it started to do was put forward a number of rejigging of what we previously thought was a priority. So let's talk a little bit about the telco space. All of a sudden, all of these people that were previously working in large office blocks or contact centres suddenly are all working from home. Immediately there's a big strain on broadband because everyone's working from home. Telephony networks came under strain. So the reality is that for a consumer, network stability and resiliency were number one priority. I know, Netflix, Disney Plus. I know it's a bit geeky, but I've got a Dolby Atmos system at home. I love it. But actually, during the pandemic, they switched off 4K and Dolby Atmos in order to reduce the strain on the network. So for consumers, resiliency and stability was really important. The second thing, and we touched on it a little bit, is virtualization. So you've gone from single-digit contact centres to thousands and thousands of contact centres because all of a sudden all of your agent population is working from home. Now as a business we then need to ensure that we're able to pipe the calls or the digital contacts through to the agents who are now working at home. It also presented some unique challenges because also we need to ensure that their broadband to be able to accept those calls or those digital contacts was stable enough to be able to cope and was fast enough. One of our partners actually, an insurance provider in the Nordics, Tryg, great people, one of the accounts that I used to manage actually. They did a webinar for us last year. When COVID hit, they saw a massive spike on insurance claims. And predominantly it was about holiday insurance claims because no one was allowed to go on holiday and they were like, I need to make a claim to get my money back. They saw a 300% increase in contact volume. You tie that in with the fact that absence rates hit 40%. So in contact centres, agents were out because they were unwell. And certainly at the peak, every customer that I spoke to said it peaked at around 40% of all our advisors were out at any given moment. So we've got a 300% increase in contact volume. We've got a change in query types from traditionally what we got. Almost half of my agent population is out unwell. And now what I need to do is I've got to bring in a load of part-time advisors who are working from home, who I need to get trained and up to speed in double quick time to be able to cope with all of this. That is exactly what they did. And actually they saw over that period zero impact on customer satisfaction. No impact at all. So let's just think about that for a moment. I'm bringing in a load of new starters. I've got 40% of my headcount out. My query types have changed and the volume's gone up by 300%. And yet my experience was not impacted in any way, shape or form. The other thing that COVID did was it drove digitisation. So I think it's fair to say pretty much every business in the world probably has a digital transformation program up and running at various stages, right? But when you scratch the surface of any large business and you really start to apply pressure, voice is still king. That is the reality. Scratch the surface of any organisation, and actually when push comes to shove, voice is the one that they tend to focus on. Now, interestingly, when COVID hit, we saw a fundamental shift in the thinking because of half of my agent population is unwell. I've got an uplift in query types. People are working from home. I'm struggling to cope with all of this. So I need a route that will allow me to reduce the amount of contacts that are coming in and wherever possible, make those contacts as quick and as effortless as possible. So digitisation became a huge focus for pretty much every business in the world in order to cope through that period. The other impact was retail closures. So all of a sudden, all those retail stores are all shut. That footfall, that traffic has to go somewhere. And they were ringing in, or they were contacting you via email or going through the digital channels. So that added additional strain on an environment that was already creaking at that point. And then the final point is agent support. So you've got, again, think about contact centres. Again, I'm not sure, how many people have worked in contact centres before? There's a number of you, that's good. We all know that when you're an advisor on the phone, if I'm struggling, pop my hand in the air and then a floor walker or a team leader comes over, says, right, I can give you some help. Or your mate that sat next to you said, yeah, you need to go and do this, right? All of a sudden, those agents are now working from home. I can stick my hand in the air for hours, no one's going to come and help me. So it became really important to ensure that we got the right support in place for the agents. I think the reality is that we as leaders over the many, many years that we've worked in the industry have rightly focused on building processes around the customer journey. It's built around the customer. But the reality is that invariably we forget the agents. According to Gartner, 84% of contact centre agents hate their desktop tools. And I'm thinking back to, my day when I first joined the contact centre 27 years ago as a stopgap, I might add, whilst I found a job I really wanted to do. Well, that worked out well, because here I am still talking about contact centres. But if I think back to those early days, I rocked up to my induction. It was probably 4 to 6 weeks of having information thrown at me. In addition, I was told to use a bunch of systems, CRMs, various systems that are disparate and disconnected. You know, no customer 360, 27 years ago, was an unknown concept. But the reality is I'm expected to learn all of the processes and learn how to use the systems. And the reality is I've probably retained about 10% of the information that's been thrown at me. I then get released into a live environment. And again, the reality is, back then there were no such thing as grad bays. Things have come on a long way since then. You know, we're a lot more supportive of our agents these days. But the reality is, it's the same. You come out of induction, you're thrown into a live environment, and you're stuffed with a whole raft of disconnected systems. And by the way, here is a list of KPIs as long as your arm that you're expected to hit. And if you don't, I'm going to beat you up. It's no wonder that attrition runs so high in the contact centre, you know, and COVID also has impacted the attrition rate, but I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. It's a tough job, and the job is becoming more difficult. And the reason is, everyone post-COVID is now focused on automation. We need to automate the mundane. We need to remove those high volume, low complexity query types. We need to implement virtual assistants. We need to do X, Y, and Z to ensure that we are, wherever possible, reducing the net number of contacts that are coming through. But the remaining contacts, once you've automated the mundane, gives you a low volume of high complexity query types. So as an agent, my job just became infinitely more difficult because every call or contact I've now got is much more complex. So at eGain, we focus very heavily, and we've worked with BT in order to focus on the agent experience, because it's an area that we tend to forget. We focus on the customer, rightly so, but we don't tend to spend any time thinking about what's important for the agents. The reality is that people in the business are the biggest commodity that you've got, but they're also expensive, right? That's the reality. And when you're getting close to treble-digit annualized attrition, think about that for a moment. I'm a new starter, I come in. My induction is anywhere from probably 6 weeks to 3 months, right? I then spend 6 months getting back to the level of performance that the agent that I'm replacing who left at that point. The reality is, over the next 3 months, I'm probably going to leave anyway, and that cycle begins again, right? So you're constantly running to try and maintain the level of performance that you've got today. And it's a tough job in customer service. I could not go back there and do that job now. I'm too old, I'm too miserable, frankly. But, you know, the reality is that it is really genuinely a difficult job. So if we think a little bit about the agent experience, we've kind of said, look, because attrition runs at such a high rate and because it's such an expensive activity to constantly backfill all of your FTE and your headcount, we need to start to focus more on the agent experience, and that is a key priority, and that is exactly what BT and ourselves did. We very much focused on the agent experience and making their lives as effortless as possible. So if you think a little bit about the millennial agents, the reality is they've got a short attention span, you know. They don't read books or documents. They like to be spoon-fed with information. They're used to being guided through consumerized apps. And the reality is they just want you to show them the tools and let them figure it out. So the tools need to be proactive, guided, and supportive as they go through that process. So the agent of today, what they're looking for is for that solution to be guided, walk me through the process, give me advice at the appropriate point. It needs to be proactive, so intervene at the appropriate point with the right information. It needs to be personalised, so it needs to understand who I am as an agent, who the customer is, the issue that they've got, and what the best route for resolution is. And it needs to be able to improve with use. So it should really be like a GPS, a good GPS. So it's guiding, it's taking you on that journey. But from a business perspective, they're also looking for the same thing. So what I'm going to do now is I'll hand over to Steve. He'll talk you through the BT story. Steve.
Noel, thank you very much. Wonderful information that you've given us, but let's find out how we've actually had it put into practice. And I think this is the one thing you do need to remember. This is something that is actually working today. And there's a slide right towards the end of my piece that I really want you to take information from because it's vital to remember. So just a little bit about who BT are. They're a formation of two companies, Orange and T-Mobile, many, many years ago. They came together to form Everything Everywhere in 2010, and they rebranded in 2012. Now you can imagine if you've got a knowledge base, you've set up two separate brands, then you're trying to bring them all together. How do you actually manage that process? How do you look after that rebranding cycle? And then finally they joined with BT in 2016. So just as a brief history, that's where they come from. If we look more information with regard to the EEBT realm, we're talking 19 million customers, okay? There's 31 million connections that are taking place, all right? They are Europe's fastest growing 4G network, okay? They're moving more and more into the 5G realm now as well, so they're becoming stronger and stronger as they go through. Just some other facts about them. They're employing 10,000 employees, right, that are using eGain. They have 900 odd shops around the place that are using the eGain platform as well, okay? And they've got about a 90% UK coverage. So it's a huge amount with regard to who's using everything in their services. But if we look at the calls that they answer, they're answering 3.5 million calls every single month. Okay? They make 700,000 outbound calls. So remember Noel mentioned things at scale. This is the type of scale that we're actually talking about. So what was their biggest challenge? Well, it's something that everybody faces. Ofcom, which is our UK version of controlling the communications environment, deemed that they were the worst of any of our telco providers that we had, and that's where we started with. Now they set themselves the goal of wanting to become the best. So they analyzed what was going on, and one of the things that they discovered was that there is a variation in performance and a consistency that wasn't quite there with regard to how agents were answering customers. And I think that's also key. If you think about it, don't make the agent look for information. Give them information. Remember, one of the things that Noel spoke about was that whole concept of being proactive and guided throughout the process. All right? So they looked at it and they thought, or they asked the question, is it our people that are delivering great service regardless of the process, or is it the process that's delivering and not the people? Now you might turn around and say, well, what do you mean by people? Agents are people. But if you think about it, in reality, you get a whole range of different skill sets within any call center, all right? And it's how do you get everybody to give you the best return that you can out of them? And that's one of the things where Noel was mentioning that whole idea on getting agents up to speed quicker, training agents quicker. That becomes so much more important, okay? Their best agents were nailing it every single time. So what they were trying to find out is how can we get our best agents to be the same right across the board. We want our worst agents to become our best agents. We want our mediocre agents to improve. And that is what EE were able to do. So Right in the beginning, there were 4 separate knowledge bases. You had the T-Mobile knowledge base, you had the Orange knowledge base, and then when they came together, they had the Everything Everywhere database. All right, so you can imagine now, what's an agent going to do? If I get a call, who do I go to? Why do I go to that place? All right, you're making it more and more difficult. So they wanted to bring everything together into a single location. So just reiterating around those 4 knowledge tools, only 10% of their agents were using the knowledge base consistently. Now you imagine, 3.5 million calls, 10%, it's quite a number that you're starting to see float around. Each knowledge base had inconsistent data. It was hard for agents to find it. Okay, which knowledge base? Do I have to research for this? Where do I need to go? Imagine keeping that person on the telephone line while you try and figure out, where am I going to get this information from? So the more difficult you make it for agents, the less happier they are. They didn't have an intelligent way of keeping a contact sheet or keeping a note of what type of contacts they were having. Now I want you to remember that, because in a couple of slides' time we're going to talk about how they saw a benefit of good reporting come through. And of course, with so many knowledge bases, 20,000 articles. Now let's be honest, how many agents are going to be able to find knowledge in a stack of 20,000 articles? All right, it's difficult for them to find the right answer every single time. So they came to us and we went through quite a lengthy process working with them of identifying what it is that they were trying to do. And they told us that some of the reasons why they chose the eGain knowledge base were primarily because of the capabilities around the knowledge base. Okay, what it could do, how it could deliver what they needed. And the key factor there is knowledge management, AI, and analytics. All right, together they actually gave BT what they were after. We also were quite keen to work with them on automation. How can they use our tools to automate some of their processes? And this is where you start to see the deflection that Noel was talking about, that ability to do things ahead of the time and work with everything. And then naturally we collaborate. They've been with us for so long. We continually collaborate with them on where they're going next, what their next steps are. And you'll see that again later on, how we've actually put the system together to give them that flexibility, that ability to change what they're doing as they require that change without too much work. The other thing that's important is implement the changes quickly. And this is where innovation really comes to the fore, that ability to mold what you're doing very, very quickly and adjust what's going on. So one of the things they did when they were looking at combining everything together is, how do other people do it? And they took a page out of the NHS's book where the triage process that the NHS go through is to make sure that they don't get it wrong. Okay, triage correctly, deal with the patient first time, and we know it's going to be successful. That's what they did with their customers. They saw them as their patients. Okay, and it was able to turn around how they did everything within the organization. So they introduced a system called Albert. They chose Albert because Einstein was available. Okay, that's a trademark and you can't use it, so they chose Albert instead. It was the brains behind their organization. So it contained customer and device information for agents to find. It had that pause and resume that Noel mentioned earlier on. Do you want to do my slides, Noel? And it allowed them to save sessions, keep a historic piece of information about this customer. How many times have you called an organization looking for help? And you said, I sent an email in yesterday. What happened to it? And an agent will invariably turn around and say, I'm sorry, sir, I work on the telephones. I didn't get a chance to see the email. Bringing that information that you can save the session, make it available for all the agents is important. It's key to what they were doing. They also looked at the business intelligence that they have on a customer. If I already know who you are, if I already know the device you have, why should I ask that question? Okay? So integrating to the back-end environments, pulling that information to the fore, making it available to the agent as we go through. So what they did was they created this desktop. This desktop, they said to their agents, every single call that you take will have a path through knowledge. Remember, let's make it easy. Don't think about it. Be proactive. Be guided. All right? Give them the information that they need. Now, just very, very quickly, if I look at the screen on the right-hand side, that gray space, that is where the business intelligence on the customer is going to come into it for an agent to see. I haven't had to think, well, where am I going to get that from? Oh, I've got to go over here to get that information. No. Bring it into the desktop. Make sure it's available right throughout everything that you are going to do. Every single contact was going to go through knowledge. All right? The minute that I came here from the IVR, I bootstrapped the knowledge. I gave them information from the customer, the device, the contract they were on. Everything became available for them to see. All right? They integrated 22 different back-end systems to this desktop. Now you can imagine an agent's life, and I'm pretty sure if any of you have got agents, how many systems do they look at to go and get that information on your customer? Bring it to them. Give it to them right here where they need it. Once they had got into the knowledge, led down that idea, the whole concept here is guided help. On the left-hand side, because I'm using knowledge, it's going to tell me what the next available step is. All right? It's got that customer information coming in on the right-hand side. But remember I mentioned that idea of being able to innovate very, very quickly. They have control of where the information is going to come from, how it's going to be used, so it's very easily expandable. They don't have to come back to us to expand it. It's not going to require huge amounts of heavy lifting to get it. All right? It's easy to be used. All right? This screen for them, clean, concise. All right? It's very, very easy to use. So from an agent's perspective, remember Noel said that, previously before COVID, we used to have 1 or 2 call centers. Now we've got 10,000 call centers. All right? This helps people understand what's next, what's coming up, and how it's going to be used. With a desktop like this, it reduces your handling time. It will drive to the right process every single time. All right? Now, if any of you have ever returned your iPhone back to your provider, there are certain things that you must do for that iPhone to be repaired and to be reused or recycled. Right? What EE and BT did was they had a step-by-step process created for their agents. And if their agents followed this every single time, if the customer failed to do the steps that they wanted them to do and the telephone came back bricked, can't be reused, it wasn't the agent's fault. If the agent never followed that process, then the agent was held accountable. Right? Their one message that they gave to their agents was trust in the knowledge, because we're the ones who are responsible for it. You tell the customer what's in the knowledge. It makes your life simple. You don't have to think about this. It's easy to work with. So they present every single time to their agents a very clean surface. Very easy to use, very simple, very focused. Now, Noel mentioned the whole concept of pause and resume. What they also allowed their agents to do, and we'll see this a little bit later on, is they allowed their agents to listen to their past calls as well. So not only were quality assurance doing it, but the agent could go back and listen to it. They could go back and see what they did the last time. So during COVID, this was vital because it gave them the option of going back and understanding what they did the last time if they had forgotten about it. Okay? So they've got access to the paused sessions that they had on hold. And they can go back and have a look at stuff they've done in the past. Very, very important. So now you're starting to build this picture of your customers. One thing with any knowledge base is you cannot let it stagnate. So EE built into their environment a full feedback loop. This was important because it gave the agents the feeling that they actually owned some of the knowledge construct. They knew that if they said this did not particularly work for me, they could come back here and it would get fixed. It would get tidied up. It would be made better. Now what they also did was they were quite clever. They took a group of their most senior agents, their most efficient agents, and they dragged them into the center of the call center right in the beginning. And they were their knowledge kings. All right? Then what they did was, we're going to add a group of people that we're going to rotate. So every so often they would rotate people in and out of the knowledge team. Because after about 3 months, your knowledge is stagnant. So go back out on the floor and learn some more. This meant that ownership of the knowledge wasn't left to a dark room. You knew who owned that knowledge. Clear response capabilities. So what they delivered when they rolled it out was all content was written and delivered by their best performing agents. It's agent owned. All right? And that is key. Bring ownership back to where it needs to be. They deployed and trained over 10,000 advisors, not on the things that Noel was trained on. This is the KPI that you've got to know. This is the system you've got to know 1,000,001 times. They trained them on how to use the tool. The knowledge is there to educate, but you don't need to have that from the get-go, because that's going to come to you as you go through it. They took those 20,000 individual articles and reduced that to 25 guided help processes, right? Remember that whole concept of, I don't have to decide where to go. You're going to give it to me straight away. You're going to make it available to me straight there. They completely overhauled their knowledge. So remember right at the beginning, I told you that there were 3 companies. There was T-Mobile, there was Orange, and then there was EE. 3 separate databases. There was no consistency to format, to font, to look, to feel. But they overhauled that entire section and made it look identical. Made it easy to use. If I'm looking for an answer, that's where I'm going to find it. So it was so much better. They defined that clear content, ownership path. Who was the author? Who do I need to speak to? How do I get it repaired? Okay? And there was one single content team. Now I need you to remember that, because we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes' time. Okay? What they discovered was, once this was rolled out, okay, when guided help was used, that's that guided process, all right, their FCR was measured at 85% when it was used every single time. When it wasn't used, the FCR was 62%. Now if you do the math, okay, don't subtract one from the other, okay, it's an increase of 23 percentage points. However, that's a 37% improvement. Now remember, that was one of the things Noel mentioned right on his very first slide. Okay? This is not something, it's not a pipe dream. It's something that customers are doing today. And you can achieve that as well. Customer satisfaction improved. All right? That's quite important. Remember, Ofcom said that they were the worst. Now they were starting to come up into those ranks of being one of the best that was being provided. And then that improved speed to competency. All right? Especially as your agents are turning over so fast. How do we deal with that? How do we get people to be able to continue to work, be proactive, be productive as quickly as we can? Graphical view very, very quickly. The customer experience changed. All right? Consistent information being given. Doesn't matter who you talk to, you're going to get the same response. Okay? The better experience that they had meant that there was a great customer service. But from a business perspective, first contact resolution increased, that 35% change. Okay? The average handle time aligned to what they needed it to be. The complaints were reduced. Ofcom was happy. They stopped getting fines. And in our world, where fines are, it cripples us. All right? The training now could be focused more on how to deal with customers rather than how to deal with the problem. Work with your customer. Become and build your customer relationship stronger and stronger. And then the last piece, the most important piece, is that advisor experience. I remember this was something Noel said right in the beginning. All right? It's the one area that we tend to leave to the last. It's the one thing we tend to forget about. The more you give or improve your advisor experience, the greater effect that's going to have on your customer experience. Okay? And I know it's strange to say this, but you can hear happiness in somebody's voice. And if you know that an agent is happy, they're able to help you, they're able to sort you out, they're not doing that mundane job anymore, it means that you are going to enjoy going back and getting help where you need it. Just very quickly, just the flow of what drove the business improvement, and the last line of this is what we're going to go back to in a couple of seconds. But when an agent follows that guided help, all right, it builds the data analysis that you need to identify what the core reasons are. Because we're using a combined system with everything coming together, you're able to add the additional metrics that you need to improve the quality of the service that you're delivering. This also presents you with insight, valuable insight that you probably didn't know you had available to you. But now everything is working together as a cohesive unit, you're starting to see this. And two things came out of this. I'm going to do them backwards. The first thing is people and performance management was easier. All right? It was so much easier to work with. People were happy doing their job. There was less performance problems. But most important of all, you could now start to drive the business to affect your customer experience. Okay? So every single report that comes out of the environment, you're then able to push it back and say, don't be the cause of that call. Now that sounds strange, right? But we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. The first thing I want to focus on is deep driving those call reasons. Okay? Why did a call come in? Now remember, prior to this, they used a tick sheet to find out the call reasons, why calls came in. And what we're doing now is we're starting to do this automatically. We're starting to find the true reason a call has come in and not what the agent thinks. Okay? So metrics are becoming better and better. Secondly, we can start to see what are causing those issues. And if we trend these, we can now start making adjustments. One of the things that they did very, very effectively, that they discovered one of the handsets that customers were using on a regular basis had an inherent fault in the core code. They went back to the provider of that handset. They explained the situation, they explained what the problem was, and they fixed it at handset level. That wipes out calls straight away because you've gone to the root cause of the problem. They also started to hold department heads responsible for what they were doing. So when a bill came in, all right, if the bill wasn't clear, the contact center would get 1,000 calls saying, I don't understand my bill, what's going on? Why is it so much more expensive? So they took that metric, they went to the bill department or the billing department, and they spoke to them about making it clearer. As a result, you reduce your calls. But the whole advantage, or the way they got this information from, came from that knowledge driver right in the beginning. Okay? So by using knowledge, you're able to refine and define more and more about your core drivers and where those early warning systems can be triggered. So, by using integration, gather that information that you have. Remember, they had 22 back-end systems that they had to tie together. By using knowledge in combination with the integration, you can start to really report on what's going on and how you can make changes very, very quickly. So the key learnings that they had were transparent reporting. All right? They also discovered that you should never underestimate that cultural shift from search to guided. Search takes a long time. You've got to research, you've got to do things. But if you follow that guided process, it's quicker to use, it's easier to understand. All right? For an agent, remember, that was going to be key. And make sure that you have resiliency. We often talk about that whole fact. This is a key system which you need to maintain as much as you can. So what's next? And this is very, very important. Where do they go from here? You might look at this and you might think that they've got some amazing metrics, but their goal is always to improve. Okay? They have been with us for a long time. They're still exceptionally happy customers. And a little while ago, they got awarded this. I say a little while ago, it was last year. They got awarded the KM Reality Award all right, because it recognized an organization in the leadership of implementing knowledge management and working things through and making things better. And they were able to realize the measurable business benefits. Now, no.
Thank you. Well done. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
So we haven't got long left, so for those who are desperate to grab a coffee, I won't take too much more of your time. But really, just to kind of summarise, eGain were founded in 1997, which, excuse me, in technology terms is a lifetime, right? We have a lot of experience in the space. Our headquarters is Sunnyvale in California. We've got a European HQ, which is in Newbury in the UK, and then we've got an Indian satellite operation out in Pune. Now, what we do is deliver customer engagement solutions under knowledge management, artificial intelligence, digital engagement, and journey analytics. And we support a whole raft of business types. And we deal with some of the largest businesses in the world in some key verticals. So one of the things that is an open offer to any of our customers is the eGain value model. So if you remember right at the start of the talk, I spoke about when I joined eGain and being involved in digital transformation to help customers deploy, to operationalize and then industrialize that digital investment. A key fundamental part of that is understanding the value that you are delivering, right? Because you need to understand what the ROI is in order to pitch for more budget, in order to expand the solution and do more. So as part of the solution that we offer to any of our customers, we offer the eGain value model, which is a consultative exercise where we take your numbers. Call volume, repeat rate, handle time, how many emails, what's the repeat rate on those, what's your FTE, do you outsource, is it in-house, is it onshore, is it offshore, is it nearshore, doesn't matter. The model is flexible enough to be able to cope with all of that. And what it will do is build a picture of how you could deploy various solutions and what the ROI would be over a 3 or 5 year period. So that is available to any of our customers. The other thing that we offer is what we refer to as innovation in 30 days. This is a completely free, no obligation trial of any of our software, anything at all. So if you're thinking about, well, I'm quite interested in looking at virtual assistant or web chat or agent knowledge or web self-service, or the list goes on and on and on. We offer all of that capability, but you're not quite sure how you'd deploy it. You're not quite sure what sort of return it would give you and whether it would work for your business. Come and see us in 7H12. We're more than happy to talk to you and offer this completely free of charge with no obligation. Try our capability. We are that confident that it will deliver value that we open that challenge to anyone in this room and frankly anyone at the conference if they're interested. Now, I must make one apology. I am utterly rubbish with my timings. So essentially, the moment I finish, I'm running over there, getting my trainers on, and I am sprinting for the airport because I've got a flight to catch. So I have to apologise to everyone here. However, if you do have any questions at all, Steve's here. He'll be more than happy to talk to you. And we've got a team of people on 7H12, which is literally over there, if you'd like to come across and talk to us. So final thing from me, I think we've also, Vishal, keep me honest, we've got a raffle for Nintendo Switch. So if you come over to the booth, come and have a chat with us, get into the raffle. Free stuff. Who doesn't like free stuff? I know I do. So finally, just really to say, thank you so much for taking the time out. I know there's a lot of talks, a lot of vendors, a lot of things going on. Genuinely, I appreciate you coming along today. So thank you.
Thank you very much.